The Twits, Part 4. Once a week, on Wednesdays, the Twits had bird pie for supper. Mr. Twit caught the birds, Mrs. Twit cooked them. Mr. Twit was good at catching birds. On the day before Bird Pie Day, he would put the ladder up against the big dead tree, climb into the branches with a bucket of glue and a paintbrush. The glue he used was something called Hugtite, and it was stickier than any other glue in the world. He would paint it along the tops of all the branches, smearing it about, and then he'd go away. As the sun went down and the birds came in to roost on the big dead tree, they didn't know, poor things, that the branches were all smeared with a horrible Hugtite. The moment they landed on a branch, their feet stuck, and that was that. The next morning, which was Bird Pie Day, Mr. Twit would climb up the ladder again and grab all the wretched birds that were stuck into the trees. It didn't matter which kind they were to him. Song thrushes, blackbirds, sparrows, crows, little jenny wrens, robins, anything. They all went into the pot for Wednesday's bird pie supper. On one Tuesday evening, after Mr. Twit had been up the ladder and smeared the glue Hugtite all over the tree, 4 little boys crept into the garden to look at the monkeys. They didn't care about the thistles and stinging nettles, not when there were monkeys to look at. After a while, they got tired of looking at the monkeys, so they explored further into the garden and found the ladder leaning against the big dead tree. They decided to climb up it, just for fun. Nothing wrong with that. The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out to collect the birds, he found 4 miserable little boys sitting in the tree, stuck as tight as can be by the seat of their pants to the branches. There were no birds, of course, because the presence of the boys had scared them away. Mr. Twit was furious.
"As there are no birds for my pie tonight," he shouted, "then it'll have to be boys instead."
He started to climb the ladder.
"Boy pie might be better than bird pie," he went on, grinning horribly. "More meat and not so much tiny bones."
The boys were terrified. "He's going to boil us," cried one of them. "He'll stew us alive," wailed the second. "He'll cook us with carrots," said the third. But the 4th boy, who had more sense than the others, whispered, "Listen, I've just had an idea. We're only stuck by the seats of our pants. So quick, unbutton your pants, slip out of them, and we'll fall to the ground." Mr. Twit had reached to the top of the ladder and was just about to make a grab for the nearest boy, when they all suddenly tumbled out of the tree and ran for home with their naked bottoms winking at the sun. Now for the monkeys. The 4 monkeys in the cage in the garden were all one family. They were Mugglewump and his wife and their 2 small children. But what on earth were Mr. and Mrs. Twit doing with monkeys in their garden? Well, in the old days, they had both worked in a circus as monkey trainers. They used to teach monkeys to do tricks and to dress up in human clothes and to smoke pipes and all that other sort of nonsense. Today, though, they were retired. Mr. Twit still had wanted to train monkeys. It was his dream that one day he would own the first great upside-down monkey circus in the world. That meant the monkeys had to do everything upside down. They had to dance upside down, on their hands with their feet in the air. They had to play football upside down. They had to balance on top of one another upside down, with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest baby monkey at the very top. They even had to eat and drink upside down. And that's not an easy thing to do, because the food and water has to go up the throat, when in fact it's almost impossible. It should be going down. The poor monkeys had to do it, otherwise they got nothing. All this sounds pretty silly to you and me. It sounded pretty silly to the monkeys too. They absolutely hated having to do this upside down nonsense day after day. It made them giddy, standing on their heads for hours on end. Sometimes the 2 children monkeys would faint with so much blood going to their heads. But Mr. Twit didn't care about that. He kept them practising for 6 hours every day, and if they didn't do as they were told, Mrs. Twit would soon come running with her beastly stick. Mugglewump and his family longed to escape from the cage in Mr. Twit's garden and go back to the African jungle where they had come from. They hated Mr. and Mrs. Twit for making their lives so miserable. They also hated for what they did to the birds every Tuesday and Wednesday. "Fly away, birds!" they used to shout, jumping about in the cage and waving their arms. "Don't sit on that big dead tree. It's just been smeared all over with sticky glue. Go and fly and sit somewhere else." But these were English birds, and they couldn't understand the weird African language the monkeys spoke, so they took no notice and went on using the big dead tree and getting caught for Mr. Twit's bird pie. Then, one day, a truly magnificent bird flew down from the sky and landed on the monkey cage. "Good heavens!" cried all the monkeys together. "It's the roly-poly bird. What on earth are you doing over here in England, roly-poly bird?" Like the monkeys, the roly-poly bird came from Africa, and he spoke the same language as they did. "I've come for a holiday," said the roly-poly bird. "I like to travel." He fluffed his marvellous coloured feathers and looked down rather grandly at the monkeys. "For most people," he went on, "flying away on a holiday is very expensive, but I can fly anywhere in the world for nothing." "Do you know how to talk to these English birds?" Muggle-Wump asked him. "Course I do," said the roly-poly bird. "It's no good going to a country and not knowing the language." "Then we must hurry," said Muggle-Wump. "Today is Tuesday, and over there you can already see the revolting Mr. Twit up the ladder, painting sticky glue all on the branches of the big dead tree. This evening, when the birds come to roost, you must warn them not to perch on that tree, or they'll be made into bird pie." That evening, the roly-poly bird flew round and round the big dead tree, singing out, "There's sticky stuff all over that tree. If you land on the branches, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or tomorrow you'll finish in a hot bird pie." The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket to snatch all the birds from the big dead tree, there wasn't a single one on it. They were all sitting on top of the monkey cage. The roly-poly bird was there as well, and Muggle-Wump and his family were inside the cage, and the whole lot of them were laughing at Mr. Twit. Mr. Twit wasn't going to wait another week for his bird pie supper. He loved bird pie. It was his favourite meal. So that very same day he went after the birds again. This time he smeared the top of the monkey cage with sticky glue, as well as the branches of the big dead tree.
"Now I'll get you," he said, "whichever one you land on."
The monkeys crouched inside the cage, watching all of this. And later on, when the roly-poly bird came swooping in for an evening chat, they shouted out, "Don't land on our cage, roly-poly bird. It's covered in sticky glue. So is the tree." And that evening, as the sun went down and all the birds came in again to roost, the roly-poly bird flew around and round the monkey cage and the big dead tree, singing, "There's sticky stuff on the cage and the tree. If you land on either, you'll never get free. So fly away, stay up high, or you'll finish up tomorrow in a hot bird pie." The next morning, when Mr. Twit came out with his huge basket, not a single bird was sitting either on the monkey cage or the big dead tree. They were all perched happily on the roof of Mr. Twit's house. The roly-poly bird was up there as well, and the monkeys were in their cage, and the whole lot of them were hooting with laughter at Mr. Twit.
"I'll wipe that silly laugh off your beaks," Mr. Twit screamed at the birds. "I'll get you next time, you filthy, feathery frumps. I'll wring your necks, the whole lot of you, and have you bubbling in the pot for bird pie before this day is out."
"And how are you going to do that?" asked Mrs. Twit, who'd come outside to see what all the noise was about. "I won't have you smearing sticky glue all over the roof of our house." Mr. Twit got very excited. "I've got a great idea," he said. He didn't bother to keep his voice down, because he didn't think monkeys could understand. "We'll both go into town right away, and we'll buy a gun each," he shouted. "How's that?" "Brilliant!" cried Mrs. Twit, grinning and showing her long yellow teeth. "We'll buy those big shotguns that spray 50 bullets or more with each bang."
"Exactly," said Mr. Twit. "Lock up the house while I go and make sure the monkeys are safely away."
Mr. Twit went over to the monkey cage. "Hut, he barked in his fearsome monkey trainer's voice. "Upside down, all of you, and jump to it, one on top of the other. Quick, get on with it, or you'll feel Mrs. Twit's stick across your backsides." Obediently, the poor monkeys stood on their hands and clambered one on top of the other. with Mugglewump at the bottom and the smallest child at the top.
Now, stay there till we come back, Mr. Twit ordered. Don't you dare move and don't overbalance. When we return in 2 or 3 hours' time, I shall expect to find you all in exactly the same position as you are now. You understand?
With that, Mr. Twit marched away. Mrs. Twit went with him, and the monkeys were left alone with the birds.